New York Times has a very good story about what happens when we arm different kinds of rebels throughout the world. Now, we're often told by the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the media, etc., it's okay, just give them weapons, just give them weapons. So John McCain comes out on television and yells at us every once in a while to give fill-in-the-blank weapons. If we had just given fill-in-the-blank more weapons, everything would have been fine. The moderate Iraqis, the moderate Syrians, all these mythical moderates that are floating around, and the moderate Contras. If we just give them more weapons. Well, it's interesting because it turns out that the CIA actually did an internal report where they looked into what happens when we give these people weapons. Well, let's find out. Go to the New York Times. The still classified review, one of several CIA studies commissioned in 2012 and 2013 in the midst of the Obama administration's protracted debate about whether to wade into the Syrian civil war, concluded that many past attempts by the agency to arm foreign forces covertly had a minimal impact on the long-term outcome of a conflict. They were even less effective, the report found, when the militias fought without any direct American support on the ground, which, by the way, would have been the case in Syria. So, turns out, at best, minimal effect. Now, to be fair, there was one case where it worked fairly well. Let me tell you about that case. One exception the report found was when the CIA helped arm and train the Mujahideen rebels fighting the Soviet troops in Afghanistan during the 1980s, an operation that slowly bled the Soviet war effort and led to a full military withdrawal in 1989. The Mujahideen rebels. Whatever happened with those guys? Oh, right. But the Afghan-Soviet war was also seen as a cautionary tale. Some of the battle-hardened Mujahideen fighters later formed the core of Al-Qaeda and used Afghanistan as a base to plan the attacks on September 11th of 2001. So our one success story of arming foreign fighters was when we armed the guys who would turn into Al-Qaeda. Oops. Now, look, that's not a success story, obviously. This is as disastrous a story as you can get in terms of the eventual long-term consequences of us continuing to arm everyone in the world, hoping for good results. Now, that's disastrous to us. Remember, though, for the military-industrial complex that keeps pushing for all these arms, which are their arms, to be sold to those fighters, that's actually not that bad an effect. See, then we use the arms to fight against the Soviets, have the Mujahideen fight against them, then they use the arms against us, and then we got so mad, we used a lot more arms to invade Afghanistan, then later Iraq, and then when we invaded Iraq, that created ISIS, and guess what we had to do? We had to arm the moderate Syrian rebels fighting against ISIS and use more of our arms to fight against ISIS. So you see that? Their stock prices not only just went up, they're literally at record rates right now. Did a separate story a little while back showing the 5 major defense contractors at record stock prices now. Because these programs might have been a disaster for us, but they were awesome for business. Well, specifically the defense business. Okay, now, let's take a broader look at this and look into some of the details, see if we missed anything here. New York Times explains, more frequently, however, the CIA backed insurgent groups fighting leftist governments, often with calamitous results. Great, calamitous results. The 1961 Bay of Pigs operation in Cuba, in which the CIA trained Cuban guerrillas launched an invasion to fight Fidel Castro's troops, ended in disaster. During the 1980s, the Reagan administration authorized the CIA to try to bring down Nicaragua's Sandinista government with a secret war supporting the Contra rebels, who were ultimately defeated. Okay, now, remember, by the way, we funded that campaign for the Contras by selling weapons to the Iranians, who we now turn around and say we might have to attack. All options are on the table because they've got weapons, some of which we sold to them so that we can get weapons for the Contras in another disastrous effort. Does any of this sound like it's helping the United States of America? Okay, well, let's go fast forward a little bit and get to our modern times here. In 2006, the CIA set up a gun-running operation to arm a group of Somali warlords who united under the Washington-friendly name Alliance for the Restoration of Peace and Counterterrorism. That effort backfired, strengthening the Islamist fighters that the CIA had intervened to defeat. Oops. Here we go again. Who thought that these guys who named the group the Restoration of Peace and Counterterrorism, so, oh, well, good, look at that. Well, that's exactly what we wanted. Gee, I wonder if that was a coincidence or an effort for them to get all the arms and then do whatever the hell they wanted with them. It's okay because somebody sold the arms. They got rich either way. So anyway, CIA does this report. It's very, very clear. Now, President Obama listens to it in the past saying, hey, if we arm rebels in Syria, it might not work out well for us. Some of those rebels turned out to be ISIS. Good decision. So anyway, we've learned our lesson and we're going to move forward. So we're not going to arm these guys going forward because it's counterproductive at best, right? So let me read you near the end of the New York Times story. Quote, last month, Mr. Obama said he would redouble American efforts by having the Pentagon participate in arming and training rebel forces in Syria. Of course, as always, we have learned nothing, and that is on purpose, because the point isn't to help the American people. The point is to create more and more conflict so you sell more and more arms.